Good morning, friends. Welcome to the 5th episode of the PCOC Family Workshop, where we are focusing on how to manage our fear and anxiety using spiritual practices. I want to share with you today one of both my favorite and one of the most difficult spiritual practices that I am still in the process of learning, and that is the practices of silence and solitude. I have learned so much about myself. I've learned to hear God, and I've learned how God can meet me in my moments of anxiety and fear. Last video, I shared with you about how very honestly, I really do struggle with anxiety a lot. And as I mentioned before, morning is one of those times that I wrestle the most, usually the dark early, which incidentally is also my favorite time of day. It's when I wake up and I get to meet God. And part of why that's my favorite time of day is it's because it is the quietest part of my day. I've learned over the course of the last couple of years how to really appreciate the value of silence and solitude. So as most of you probably know, I have 3 boys and a husband and a dog and a cat. We also live next door to my in-laws, and we homeschool. And so that means that I am home most of the time, which is a wonderful blessing. It is such a it's a blessed life that I have. My life is very loud. It is chaotic. It is all about people, and there are people present 100% of the time. That little bit of a percentage, though, when there aren't people around, is the time that I get to really focus on God, and I get to focus on hearing Him, and I get to focus very honestly on working through a lot of those things that cause me a lot of anxiety, that really getting those thoughts under control that really do cause a lot of fear. And so silence and solitude are 2 disciplines that I began really focusing on very intentionally, probably 2018. And I say that because it was in 2018 that I took a course, a spiritual formation course on silence and solitude. And it was a 6-week course where I watched videos and I did some weekly work and I read some books. And I really was introduced in a really gentle and beautiful way to this concept of just sitting with God. And in that sitting and in that quiet, I really had to come face to face with the fact that truly anxiety is an issue for me. And I think it was there that I was able to draw my attention not only to the human side of me that wrestles with that, but also what God has to teach me in those emotions, and then how God can use so many of His beautiful blessings that of interaction with us to be able to quiet our spirit and to quiet my thoughts, to be able to create a space through silence and solitude that allows me to name those things that really cause anxiety and fear, to be very honest about those things, and then to allow God to do His work in me. It's through silence and solitude that I started having space to practice things like breath prayer that Steve has talked about, to be able to practice worship like Aaron has talked about in a way that was very meaningful to me, that God was able to do really good work with that because I was being still. And one of the verses that constantly I have to work on, that I have to bring to mind regularly, and that I use as part of my regular breath prayer practice is the verse Psalm 46:10 that Steve used, which is, "Be still and know that I am God." Because that instruction is such a simple phrase, be still. But for some of us more than others, that is a powerful imperative, and one that's not necessarily easy. In fact, it can feel impossible. Being still is something that is is lots of levels. Being still is an instruction that we have that we can really use every part of our being to experience. Being still definitely includes our body. We talk in our children's Bible classes about the importance of being still and how being still is a discipline that we need in order to be able to listen well. We use it there to teach them the importance of having self-control over our bodies during prayer time. We talk about being still during worship training, and we use that phrase a lot, be still, be still. And we don't use it necessarily in the way that our mothers taught us, be still, but in the concept of having control of yourself, having control of your body. It reminds your brain that something important is going on. And so when we have that imperative, be still, it kind of reminds us that we need to be purposeful about stopping our movement, about being on purpose, intentionally stop our movement, being still. It's not a small thing. For me, it is much easier to be still in the dark, in the morning. It's easier for me to be still when I'm in solitude, when no one else is there that I feel that I need to take care of, or I need to listen, or I need to be attentive to. Solitude and silence go so beautifully together, because in silence, we have the ability to be still. In solitude, that's easier. And I would say for solitude, it's one of the keys for us as moms, because unless we're alone, we feel that there is pressure, and it's not imaginary. There is pressure to take care of those around us, to be present to those around us. So even if you're in a room with somebody else who's being still or quiet, in theory, I hear that it happens sometimes, then there's still that need for a lot of us. I cannot say that 100%. I know for me, even if someone else is in the room, even maybe in the house, I'm not going to be able to be as still. So being still, of course, entails like keeping our body still. But that's just part of the work. Part of the work of being still is also quieting our mind. And for me, silence of my mouth, stillness of my body, solitude, these things help. They're like step 1, step 2, and step 3 before you get to the part where you're actually still in my mind. Because like I think probably a lot of you, anxiety has the beginnings in our thoughts. And so for me, silence and solitude, stillness, gives me the ability to then name those thoughts, be honest about those thoughts, be clear about those thoughts, and to be able to then offer those to God. There's a really powerful imagery that has helped me, that might help you. And there's a couple of different versions of this. I've had to kind of work through some metaphors that work for me the best, but an image of sitting beside a quiet stream, which works with that idea of silence and solitude. So you're standing kind of in your mind's eye next to a creek or a stream, and you're alone, and you're there on purpose to meet God. And as the water goes by, that water kind of can signify in a lot of ways just that agitation of our emotion. And in my imagination, I can kind of see that water may shift and move relative to how I feel. And one of the suggestions that I've received through my own study of silence and solitude is to utilize that imagery. And when I recognize that there is a thought or an emotion that causes a lot of anxiety, it causes fear, or it just kind of distracts me from listening and being still, and just knowing that God is God, that thing, God is God, but what about this? Or this is causing anxiety. And in the imagery, the action, the thought action that you can do is to take that thought, whatever it is, if it is, Adrian has this thing he's worried about, or, what about the kids' school, or am I doing enough, or whatever, there's a million possibilities, is to sort of imagine it, taking that thought and laying it in that stream like you would a leaf, and just allowing that thought to go down the stream. Just allow that thought to sit on the top of the water and just be carried away down. Now, interestingly, I have found that in my cluttered thinking, often the things that are causing me anxiety are things that I don't want to forget to do later. their to-do list items, or their things like, if I put it in the stream, it may never come back. And so something that was very helpful to me that my spiritual director suggested was to imagine that that stream kind of came back to itself. So that if I put something in the stream, if I put that thought that was causing me distraction, that was causing me to not be able to be mentally still, or that was causing anxiety, I could set that in that stream, and I could trust that if it's important and if it's something that God needs me to remember later, that will come back later. And when I'm not in that place where I'm intentionally trying to set those thoughts aside, that those things will come back as they need to. It's also important to, when we set those thoughts down and we let them go for the purpose of stillness, that we don't take time or stress about, well, is that an okay thought to have? Or I don't need to be thinking about that, or I don't need to be stressing about that, or, oh, it means I don't have faith because I'm worrying about these things. Just be still. Take that opportunity to allow God to know you fully, because you are known. God knows those things deep in your soul already. None of your thoughts are a surprise to God. None of those fears are shocking him. None of those things are things that you need to worry about God judging. He's been there, done that. He's been there the whole time. And whether you are worried or fearful, or you are striving to be obedient to that imperative to be still, God is not judging those thoughts, and neither do you need to. And so in your effort to be still, and in your silence, in your effort to quiet your mind and to be still in your solitude, I would encourage you just to set those thoughts down and just let them go. They'll come back if they need to. And if they don't, maybe that's a good thing and a blessing. So we can be still in our body, and we can be still in our thoughts. And those things allow us then to let go a little bit of our anxiety and our fear. I wanted to read you a section from one of my favorite books on this topic, which is Invitation to Silence and Solitude. This is by Ruth Haley Barton. If ever you are interested in practicing this discipline, or learning more about this discipline, this is a beautiful book for it. And she has a beautiful way of looking at silence and solitude, that she breaks it down into rest for our mind, rest for our body, rest for our thoughts. And in her section for rest for the mind, which again is kind of the root of a lot of my anxiety, she says this encouragement. I wanted to, as we're wrapping up, offer you this. When we give in to the exhaustion that comes from trying to put everything into words and mental concepts, we give our mind permission just to stop. We give ourselves over to the experience of the reality of Christ himself. Speaking to silence and stillness, she says, in this wordless place, when we're not trying to form thoughts, when we are giving those thoughts to God, when we're encouraging our mind intentionally to rest and to set those thoughts aside, in this wordless place, the whole of our person can turn itself towards God and then wait to be addressed by God. This kind of prayer is standing in the presence of God with the mind in the heart. So it takes our mind and says, okay, we're releasing these thoughts. We're getting these thoughts under control. We're taking these thoughts captive. And when that happens, we can connect our mind and our heart much easier. And at that point of our being, where there are no divisions or distinctions, and we are all one, our body is still, our mind is still, our heart is still. And there, God's Spirit dwells, and there we have great encounters that can take place. See, here's what we want to encourage ourselves and our children, that God is always present. He is not present when we miraculously do the things that need to be done, when we strive to read our Bible and to pray and to be silent and to worship well and to practice breath prayer. Of course, he's there in those moments. But what we want to teach our children and ourselves and remind ourselves constantly is that God is always, always, always present. He is present whether we feel him or not. He is present whether we're anxious or overwhelmed or not. God is always present. These practices that we have been talking about allow our person to remember that These things allow us to emotionally, physically, in some cases, spiritually experience the thing that's already true. So often our anxiety and our fear can overwhelm our senses to such a degree that we cannot know that God is God. We cannot know the truth that He is present and working in us all the time. We cannot be aware of the transformative things that are going on in our spirit. And so we are told to be still. We are told to be silent. We are told to be silent by yourself. We are told to still your body, to still your mind, to quiet your thoughts, to get control of your emotions all at the same time. And those are things that the more we do, the more connected we are. And the more we can understand and appreciate that imperative, be still. Just be still and know that God is God. Trust that no matter what you're thinking about, no matter what you're afraid of, no matter what you're coming up with that we need to worry about, God is already there. God is already present. And just know Him. It is in that quiet space that very often God will challenge us. God will bring to mind scripture. God will bring to mind songs. He will bring to mind people. And you have the space for that when we are purposeful about practicing silence and solitude. I could talk all day about this, but I'm going to pause and be still. So, all my love to you, my friends. And as you continue to practice this, I would love to hear it. I would love at any point to talk to any of you about how this has blessed my own life and about the ways that I have learned to make these things happen in true reality, real life here. Mom, children, wife, family, ministry, so many things. I promise you, no matter how impossible it sounds, you can find silence. And you can create spaces for solitude so that you and God do the deep work of peace for your anxiety and your fear. May God bless you today, and may He grant you peace, and may He quiet your anxious thoughts, and may He take away your fear of things that are not worth the energy that He has given you to live in such better ways. All right, my friends, much love to you. Grace today.